Hey, IoTeX community, we got a real special interview today with Nathan Miller, founder and CEO of Consensus Networks, who just signed a $1.5 million contract with the US Navy to build out HealthNet, a logistics tool and medical supply chain platform. So really excited to have Nate here. Nate, you can start by introducing yourself, please.
Hey, Larry. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Super excited to talk today. Like you said, I'm CEO of Consensus Networks. I've been around blockchain for a few years now, since 2016. So I guess that makes me old in this space in some sense, but still feel like I got in late, you know. But I helped start Consensus in 2017, 2018, locked in some initial funding, and then yeah, we've been at it ever since, trying to figure out how to make blockchain networks work. So it's been fun.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're going to go through everything about Consensus Networks, your history in the IoTeX network, and what you guys have planned for the future. But, for those that have been with IoTeX for a while now, the Consensus Networks brand is very well known as one of our very first delegates back in 2019 or even 2018. So, for those that aren't familiar with Consensus Networks, who's on the team and what are your goals as a company?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we think of ourselves as a blockchain infrastructure provider. We believe that it's really important to have strong decentralized networks, and our focus has been bringing real world use cases to blockchain, and then on the flip side, just providing that robust infrastructure and you can power those applications so that when and as more use cases come onto these networks, the infrastructure is there to power these things. So there's no setbacks in growth. Our team is we've got an awesome team. We've been growing. It's great. I got to hire a lot of people this year, so pretty exciting. But two of the big skill sets we've added this year have been in data science, and we just hired our lead product manager as well to really drive forward HealthNet too. So she's got a great background in healthcare and health data. So we're just super excited to kind of keep growing here with IoTeX and in blockchain.
Definitely, combining the technical experience with some domain expertise now to really tackle this very, very large industry that, I think blockchain and IoT is very ready to disrupt, right? So, the big news that we're covering today and just adding a little color to, earlier this week, you guys put out a press release that Consensus Networks just signed a $1.5 million contract with the US Navy to build HealthNet, the blockchain-based logistics tool targeted at medical supply chain. So, you've had a long-standing history with different defense departments, U.S. government entities. How did your relationship with the U.S. Navy, the Air Force, National Institute of Health, and other branches really begin?
Yeah, so I was actually in the Navy for a while. I graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 2011, and I was a submarine officer, and so I'm very familiar with the Navy. That's when I got out of the Navy, I started Consensus, and I actually had no idea that I was going to be back working with them again. But there's a need, and I recognize that when blockchain and as it's been developing, decentralized networks, robust communication, trusted data, those are all things that I knew were extremely important from my time in the Navy. And so it's really easy for me to just take that and take it back to the Navy and say, hey, look, there's a lot of potential here for what we can do with, ensuring communication systems stay connected, ensuring data is trusted, if you think about forward operating units, they need trusted data to be able to do their missions. And so, those things are really easy for me to go back and forth, in this kind of new technology, but also understanding it from a sense with that military background. And so, I was able to do that. We've had contracts outside of this one with the Air Force, and then also a grant from the National Institutes of Health as well. Again, just diving into, improving data sharing is really what it comes down to. How do we make sure we have robust data sharing, trusted data, communication networks that work and share data. Yeah. So it's been, it's cool it's not something I thought I was going to do, but yeah, it is kind of cool to go back and try to take new technologies back to your old job.
Definitely. It gives a different definition to military grade, right? It's kind of a lot of people use that these days as marketing tools, but you guys are really applying that in real practice, right? So I think that's excellent. So we'll dive into really what the trusted data communications that are needed, but let's dive into HealthNet a little bit. HealthNet is a platform logistics tool created by consensus networks. But from your own words, kind of what is HealthNet and why is it important?
Yeah, so we think about it as an integrated data environment that works along the supply chain, to integrate along the supply chain, bringing data from a lot of different places, to fill in with existing supply chain infrastructure. And we're going to talk about it later, I'm sure, but also to fill in those gaps where infrastructure is lacking. One of the reasons we're using Pebble Tracker. So we want to be able to integrate easily with the existing system, so we're not disrupting existing workflows. We want to make the onboarding process smooth. But if there's areas where there's gaps, we want to be able to fill those as well. So some of the things that HealthNet does, everything from real-time inventory tracking, consumable monitoring, through cold chain product verification. And then I think on the tail end of that, we've got integrations into ERP and EHR systems that are pretty unique as well. So we're able to really bring everything all together. And I think it's really exciting and important to understand how much we can do when it comes to taking what's in the supply chain, being able to track it through when it's put into a patient, and then being able to track beyond just that initial use, but looking at things like long-term health effects and things like that. So there's a lot there that integrated environment is able to do throughout the healthcare continuum.
Definitely. Blockchain and IoT are definitely important parts of it, but there's also like predictability element to it using AI as well, right? So it's really a confluence of these, very frontier technologies to use blockchain and IoT as the base foundational data layer with trust, and then use AI and other technologies to really extract the insights from that trusted data, right? So, this has never been more important, right? Now, COVID-19 has really accelerated the need for trust, verifiability, and predictability in supply chains. We see the headlines everywhere, not only in the United States, but globally. So, how does this kind of timing of your kind of announcement here, what are your thoughts on the alignment of that with what's going on in the world today?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been accelerated by COVID-19. It's all over the news, breakdowns in supply chains for sure. And a lot of those vulnerabilities had already been there, but had kind of been ignored. And COVID-19 really brought everything to light. So it definitely accelerated our work and accelerated the need that we see. But there's a lot. I think there's a lot. I think I'll touch on three. One is trusted sharing of data. So, everything from between companies to across borders. When you have a global pandemic, information sharing becomes really important. But there's still considerations for information that countries or companies want to keep private. I think blockchain has a strong potential to be able to enable sharing of information that is done in a way that doesn't necessarily give up secrets or intellectual property. And so that's something really cool, I think, that exists there. The predictability thing is key as well. So building off of that trusted data and building off of what you talked about, that blockchain base, doing things like predictive analytics on supply chain data. That's been historically really hard in healthcare, especially in the United States, to have good predictability, looking at what actually real-time use is, and then using that to help predict your supply chain. It's almost always historically it's been historical data. So sometimes 2 or 3 years delayed. And that's tough, and it's tough to run a supply chain if you're looking at 2-year-old data. I mean, that's not reasonable. So there's got to be better ways to do that. Again, I think blockchain helps enable that trust to be able to use the data for things like that. And then it's the supply chain itself. So actual trust and verifying the data in the supply chain itself. Everything from facilitating clinical trials, where you need a lot of trust in the data in the clinical trial. You've got to do a clinical trial very quickly. You've got to be able to maybe do it remotely, and have trust in the identities of the people that are participating in the trial. And then, down the road, you've got significant potential for things like counterfeiting, where there's a lot of money to be made in counterfeit drugs or counterfeit vaccines and things like that. So you've got to have trust there as well. So, I think a lot of those things, are really brought to light. And I think it's a great opportunity to fix those things right now.
Definitely. I think this technology has a lot of capability to, like you said, address some of the biggest issues in today's supply chain. But the futuristic and the modern supply chain is coming very soon, right? And it's not just about patching traditional systems, but also instituting brand new capabilities that were not possible before. So, right, with this trusted data foundation, just using it as a simple ledger would be already very helpful, right? Immutable data source that is collectively accessible, collectively maintained, and just provides that single version of the truth. But what I'm really interested in understand, especially from your mind, is what kind of new economies can be built on top of this trusted data layer, right? It's not just about using it as a ledger, but the programmability of this data. What opportunities do you see there?
Yeah, for sure. I think like you said, just the trusted data itself, I think that in of itself is really important, for sure. Speaking just to HealthNet, where I think some really big things that HealthNet can do. One piece of functionality that we've developed, I think that is really valuable. I mentioned it already. Is the EHR integration.
Electronic health records.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Electronic health record. And it makes sense, but it doesn't really happen consistently across healthcare today. Automating when supplies are used, automating that usage and recording it in a patient's health record. It makes sense that should happen. You would want to automate that process and make sure every, whether it's a hip or whether it's blood product or anything in between, you'd want to make sure that is recorded in the health record for long-term patient health tracking. And that just doesn't really exist today. But we've built the ability to do that and to have trust in the information that's recorded into the health record. That unlocks a whole new level of health record management and patient health management, where now we can actually look across patient groups, and we can do significantly more if you not only know what was used on the patient, but also have trust in what that was. So a lot of data science in healthcare today is impacted by the fact that there's a lot of mistakes in health records. So the more we can minimize that, the more valuable our research into patient health goes. The other thing, and kind of building off of that, the other thing that we can now do too that did not exist before is true just-in-time delivery of medical supplies. So again, I mentioned before that it's historical data that's used, and so very hard to have any kind of just-in-time delivery of supplies. There's nothing that queues there's no automation that queues the delivery of healthcare supplies to hospitals today. They're basically forced to order it ahead of time and maintain excess balances and overhead, or they have to call a sales rep who drives in to deliver the parts. And again, that's just not efficient. And so having those predictive analytics and being able to shape it, being able to shape that data movement and feed it back to suppliers, and have automation of those ordering systems, again, can drive that process forward and make, again, true just-in-time delivery, make supply chains more efficient, reduce costs. So so pretty cool.
Absolutely. I think the thing you were saying about even bringing different parts like a hip or a certain type of blood, and I think about it almost like a Russian doll, right? I have conversations all the time with device manufacturers that use high quality components, and they want to get certifications based on the fact that they can prove this device has high quality components in it, right? But what we're talking about is kind of extrapolating that model, but also in a metaphysical way, almost, where you're talking about a human can have different components like a new hip or different kind of medical supplies being applied to them, and have a record of the kind of the history of the quality of the parts, the provenance of the parts, and manage that entire kind of human life cycle even with different parts inside of them, right? I think that's such a interesting concept that, as new digitized versions of health products come out, figuring out what humans have experienced them, even tracking the quality of health over time can really provide a lot of data that other companies can work on, right? So
yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, they do it on your car. Your car manufacturer knows the parts that more often break, and they replace those with higher quality parts. We should do the same thing for the human body. question.
Definitely. And, all of those things, can benefit from having a decentralized identity, right? A point of provenance and a way to kind of append new facts about the part or the human even, and connecting those, binding those DIDs together in order to form kind of a clearer picture of the final product, right? So
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Very, very cool. We're talking very futuristic here, but let's jump back into something about, the reason why blockchain is such a powerful tool in these concepts, right? So we all know that blockchain is about enabling trust and enabling what I like to call win-win situations, right? Even win-win-win situations across multiple stakeholders, building trust between stakeholders that don't trust each other. So tell us a little bit about the supply chain today, right? We know there's manufacturers, distributors, ultimately users, and everything in between with different intermediaries. But what stakeholders are involved in HealthNet, and how does it deliver a win-win ecosystem?
Yeah, great point. And I think, we've been talking about it a little bit already, but, specifically, we talked about some of those limitations in data sharing. Often that data is historical data. And that's kind of the way data flows in healthcare systems. I mean, you've got regulation, you've got HIPAA requirements. And so the way that, the way that information flows in healthcare, the way that payments flow in healthcare, it kind of creates these data silos that are very hard to navigate. And so you have this kind of very complex process and workarounds that people do. And they're very expensive for health systems. They're very expensive for suppliers as well. They've got to often buy data. And it's often old and incomplete data. And so both the health systems themselves and the suppliers are kind of at the mercy of the system. And so it doesn't really work very well for them. And so really where I see, and those are our big stakeholders, and where I see blockchain being able to disrupt that is exactly as we've said, being able to break down some of those silos, being able to connect some of these different data sources, and then being able to work in a way that is compliant with HIPAA, being able to transmit data, in a way that doesn't include all the patient information or doesn't include all the patient procedures, which often, may be the case in the way that some of these data flows happen. Discrete data sharing, I think, is really important, and blockchain enables that flow. DID is part of that as well, where you're able to to manage identities. So I think that is one big part of that. And I think from a broader perspective, talking about healthcare data information, I mean, those networks are just so valuable and vulnerable. I think Ireland just recently had a major hack of their health system, and doctors weren't able to access health records. And so, not only, is the information itself very valuable, but the flow of information is really valuable as well. So that, health networks are definitely major targets for attack. And blockchain definitely has the ability of creating these decentralized, robust networks that can continually share data. Step one is kind of looking at suppliers and manufacturers, but step two is hoping to share health data between hospitals, between parties that need this data, so that these networks can function even if they're under attack, or various nodes are compromised or go down. So
definitely. Yeah, I think blockchain is the perfect mechanism because there's so many different stakeholders and they all have different incentives, right? Like blockchain is a great way to incentivize proactivity, right? It's not like reactive mechanisms where something goes wrong and you have to scramble and collect all the data for a legal proceeding. It's more incentivizing people to be proactively sharing their data for a purposeful way, right? To grow those network effects of transparency and ultimately improve the overall ecosystem. So and that makes a lot of sense. So we're talking a lot about data management once it's on chain. But one thing I want to jump to is also the creation of data that you're putting onto the chain, right? Some of that is borrowing from the real world, like all these electronic health records are going to be kind of oracleized and brought onto this blockchain in order for it to interact. But the other piece of it is really interesting is the supply chain data, right? The location of medical assets, how they're being treated along the supply chain. And this is really where Pebble Tracker comes in, not only as a data source, but as a verifiable and a trusted data source. So maybe talk about the importance of that, right? You guys were one of the first projects out there to really start experimenting with Pebble Tracker, even starting in early 2020. So why did you choose to build with Pebble Tracker, and what's the importance of that trust in health?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the big question, or one of the big questions right now in blockchain is, how do we take the real world with all of its mistakes and inconsistencies and put it onto an immutable ledger and have trust in that. So, it all starts with getting as close to those data sources as possible. So that's, electronic health records, are one area where, where we're looking at is automating data inputs into that electronic health record to minimize forcing a nurse to type it in or a doctor to type it in, where you open it up for lots of mistakes. So the more we can automate that, the more we have trust of that data. It's really important for us. And then on the supply chain side, like you said, how do we take, whether it's temperature or location, and put that in to the blockchain and have confidence that source is what it says it is, and it's hasn't been compromised in any way, and it's working the way it's supposed to work. Pebble Tracker is like a no-brainer in some sense for us. It's great because it's already connected to the IoTeX blockchain, so it makes that aspect very easy for developers. We've already got those, that part is set up. And the other thing that's really great about it for us, especially as we're early, we've got use cases, but there's still a lot of customer discovery and customer, especially going into the pilot phase. We're actually going to put this device in people's hands, and in trucks and in warehouses potentially, and start to see how people actually use them. There could be a lot of things that we don't know about how they're going to use it, or new cases they want to use it for that we can anticipate through our customer interviews. But one thing we have confidence in is Pebble Tracker's got a lot of different systems on it. It's got a lot of different capabilities. Temperature, location, the whole gambit of things. And so what that does for us is that, instead of us having to worry about, okay, if something goes wrong, we have to go back and breadboard a new sensor onto this thing and then get it back out. We can, it's easy as just activating that sensor from within Pebble because of the capability. So that just makes it really great, for our development to be able to do that. So it's awesome.
Absolutely. It's really a superset of data, right? Some of these use cases probably don't need all of the data from Pebble Tracker. So for those that don't know, Pebble Tracker does GPS, temperature, humidity, air pressure, air quality, motion, and light, right? But even as we talk to different customers from the IoTeX platform perspective, starting to understand that all of these situations are going to be different, right? Depending on what consortium of stakeholders you're trying to build trust between and what kind of vertical you're focused on. Some folks we're talking to in the heavy machinery space have all these requirements about the acceleration at which these machines can actually move, right? So that's one use case, maybe not too relevant for vaccines, but Pebble Tracker can really provide that in case it does become a requirement later, right? So the open source firmware, the open source hardware, and the open source software kind of combination, I think is a great prototyping kit, especially as we design some of these use cases out, right? Very cool. And one last thing I wanted to talk about some of the design decisions you made of HealthNet, right? In the press release you guys issued, one really interesting snippet I saw quoted from you, Nate, was that you decided to build on public blockchains instead of permission blockchains, right? A lot of the work in supply chain as of late, especially for supply chain, has been focused on enterprise blockchains. The Walmart examples, IBM tracing coffee beans is mostly using it as a ledger with the authority to define what the requirements are, right? But seeing it built on public blockchain, I think, is a very big step in the direction of using, the globally managed consensus and global incentives to really drive new use cases. So tell us a little bit about that. Walk us through the decision-making process about choosing to build on public blockchains like IoTeX and Factom.
Yeah, for sure. So, the biggest thing, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to do it. One is just it exists. The network's already there, right? So you've already got a network that exists. And so at a very basic level, you don't have to worry about everything that's going to come with building that decentralized network. So that, I think, in and of itself should be good enough reason for people to convince people. Yeah. But in the other sense, I think, a lot of what we talked about today when it comes to ownership of the data, permissioning of the data, and being able to have not need to trust, not need to have full trust in how you're sharing the data. I think that's the other big thing. So in these enterprise blockchains, I think the problem is that, is that, it requires a centralized authority, and who's that centralized authority going to be? So, and a lot, take IBM, for example, right? If they're going to do this major project and have people bring their supply chains and use IBM's blockchain, well, those companies are all just giving all of their information to IBM to do whatever they want with it. And information is extremely valuable. So what I think public blockchains do and decentralized information structures do is that they allow the users to control what information they share and how they share that information and use it in the way they want to use it. And understanding that not everybody on there is somebody they can trust. And so it creates this platform that I think has much greater ability to bring in global companies and global information share and exchange far beyond anything that a private blockchain could do.
Definitely. Really interesting perspectives. We do a little things, we dabble in the enterprise blockchain space as well, but again, those requirements are much simpler, right? It's mostly about a pre-decision from like maybe 4 or 5 enterprises that have a friction point along whatever value chain they're talking about, right? And collectively they decide, okay, we're all going to dump our data, make it public together. And you're right, either it's a top level authority that's saying, hey, all my suppliers need to use this enterprise blockchain or I'm not going to do business with them. In the case of Walmart and IBM, even like, China's use of blockchain is a lot of, about, them wanting the digital currency and the transparency of it. So it's kind of a different flavor, but I think this is a really big step in using public blockchain, almost like a public blockchain with a data ownership layer on top of it using decentralized identity, which is more of an opt-in mechanism while still giving them ownership, right? So excited to see where that all it builds out. You're really pioneering this kind of a use case on public blockchain. So in that light, you guys have been building HealthNet and the consensus networks ecosystem for several years now. And we should see the first pilot, I think you mentioned, in late 2021. So what is the roadmap for this year and next year shape up to be? Maybe share what's coming in the future.
Yeah, so we're working on completing a lot of development. We have products today that we're able to show and test out, but we're really completing the build out this year, going into late 2021, and then we've got a couple pilots lined up right now. We're hoping to add a few more. We want to test out a variety of use cases, and that's really kind of important for us. The pilot stage, getting to that stage for us is extremely important, and being able to test out a variety of use cases across the supply chain. Everything from blood product management to asset tracking and things like that. But again, looking at late 2021, early 22, proving those use cases, potentially identifying some more, and then looking at scalability, being able to prove that the platform is capable. And I think the other really big important thing for us, this is from a healthcare perspective, is proving the business model as well. So there is, healthcare has a lot of money in it, but it also is inefficient, and there's definitely places where money is tight, and so convincing somebody to give you a lot of money for a new project is tough. And so we need to, part of what we're going to do in our pilot is prove that business model out as well, show that there can be cost savings, and show that we can bring those cost savings to health systems and suppliers, and that's going to be really key for us as well. And then I think from there, things are good if we prove the use case and prove the business model. HealthNet looks really good going into 2022 for sure.
Yeah.
Healthcare can move slow. That's for sure. But I think there's some really great things going on when it comes to health data sharing that didn't exist a year ago, with some changing of regulations for how electronic health record data can be shared, and some of the digital regulations around that. And that's really great for us. And we're also very modular as well. So we can plug into the EHR, we can plug into other places as well and bring our own infrastructure. So I think that's great for us too. We're really modular, and that allows us to look at a lot of different use cases without, just having to go off of kind of, just a one shot at this kind of thing. So, we're pretty excited for the next few years in HealthNet. I think it's going to be really exciting time for blockchain, but also exciting time to really build those use cases in the real world too. So super exciting.
I'm personally really pumped to see what you guys do because, we've had a lot of discussions in the past and leading up to this moment. And, I feel like the traction, even from the conversations I've been having, it's just been so across the board, right? It's no longer just about enterprises that want to use this. It's also about regulators, lawyers, and how that all fits into the business model that you're talking about, right? A lot of these changes are going to be driven by regulations like HIPAA and whatever's coming next as far as, supply chain traceability, management of electronic health records. So seeing how tools like HealthNet, like blockchain, like Pebble Tracker are going to fit into kind of the slower vision of what regulation is going to enforce is really, really going to be exciting. So, regardless if the listeners here are, maybe end users of this, regulators and lawyers, even enterprises, right, that this really piqued their interest. How can people get involved? How can people get in touch with you and contribute to this project?
Yeah, for sure. So, we would love to have any input from regulators, anybody interested in testing the product out for sure. Anybody interested in a pilot would be awesome. But you can get in touch with me at info@consensusnetworks.com. Is an easy way to get in touch. You can find us on Twitter at ConsensusNet. And you can stake to us on IoTeX as well. You can help the community, join the IoTeX community, get involved there as well. So, hope to hear from some people that are interested. And likewise, I'm really excited, Larry, as well. We've had conversations for a long time. So I was really excited to kind of take it to the next level, keep this growing, be part of IoTeX as it's growing. So very cool.
Awesome. Real world use cases coming. And, thank you so much for the time, Nate. So for those that, want to check out Consensus Network, and drop a lot of information in the bio, or the link in the bio downstairs. But yeah, anything else to add? Any final words for the community today, Nate?
No, I think that's it. Other than, I'm excited and looking forward to what's next.
Great. We'll be sure to provide any updates to the community as soon as they come out. But thank you so much for the time. We're excited to see what you're going to do in pioneering this new intersection of blockchain and IoT for medical supply chain. So thanks so much, and we'll talk soon, Nate.
Yeah, thanks, Larry.
All right.